All right, let's start with the back body pocket. What we're going to do is fold the top edge over 1/4 of an inch. You can finger press or take it to the iron, but you're going to fold it over again to hide that raw edge. And then what we want to do is stitch right along the bottom of that fold to hold it in place. And now you'll take the pocket and lay it onto the back body panel. And because I'm going to put a phone in mine, I've measured over 7.5 inches, and that's where I'm going to make my stitches. You can configure this however you want. You can do 2 rows of stitches right in the middle to give you two equal pockets. But for me, I want to put my phone back there. So I just want to make sure too at the top and the bottom that I am doing quite a few back stitches because this will be a high stress area and we want to make sure that we give the pocket some support here. Once you're done with that, you want to baste the side seams together. You can just do an 1/8 of an inch stitch right along the side, and that's just going to hold the back pocket to the body while we construct the rest of the bag. When you're done, it should look a little something like this, one small pocket. However you have yours configured, that's the beauty of making your own bags. Moving on to the side panel, what you're going to do is take the second clipped mark and you're going to bring it to the first clipped mark. You're going to move it towards the outer edge of the bag, and this will create a little crease right there. That's one side of our pleat. Pin that in place, and then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And see how I'm kind of pinching it and rolling it out toward the raw edge to the outside of the pleat. And then you want to kind of crease that to form the pleat. This is what it should look like. There we go, one side done. I like to, before I give it a baste, I like to kind of press it in place to make sure that this the little creases or the little pleats are well formed. And then you want to just baste across the top, and this is going to hold the pleat in place so we don't have pins or clips hanging out where we don't need them. And your side panel should look a little something like this. Do this for both sides and then set those aside for now. All right, grab your flap and make sure that you've transferred all your markings or clips from the pattern over to your flap. We're going to measure from the center 2.5 inches up. This is going to be placement for your label. For me, I'm doing a metal label that has prongs in the bag, but if you're using a woven label, you can just iron it on. So to install my label, I have these washers I use to mark where the prongs for the label go, and this just tells me where to open up the fabric to put those prongs through. If you are using something like what I have, and we'll be doing the same for the magnetic closure, what you want to do is take a piece of interfacing for the back of whatever it is that you're installing this on, and that's going to give you a little bit of support for and maintain the integrity of the fabric. So for me, I just clipped the interfacing. You can see here, it goes over the prongs, and then there's a washer that goes on top of that to hold it all in place. All right, now take the lining. We're going to install the magnetic closure on the lining. If you do not have your marks there, you can fold it in half and find the center. What I'm doing is making a mark 2.5 inches up from the bottom, and then I'm using the washer to put the little cut marks for the prongs, and I'm also doing the same thing on the interfacing, which we'll put on the back. So use your seam ripper to make your little holes. You don't want to make them too big because you want this to fit snug on there. So be gentle while you're making your holes, and make sure that you're choosing the right side. You want the one that has the little nipple on the outside. And then add your interfacing and your washer, press your prongs down, and you have the first side of your magnetic closure installed. Now bring your lining piece and your front piece together, and we're going to stitch them at a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, right sides together. Take your time going around the corners, and there's no need to do the top edge because we will need to get in there to turn it. So make sure before you turn it, you clip your corners, and this is going to make the fabric lay nicely when you turn it. And make sure that when you do turn it, you use something to sort of poke out. I use a chopstick. So find something that you can use to smooth out your corners. How nice that looks. And then you're going to want to top stitch this 1/8 of an inch away from the raw edge all the way around. And see, what I'm doing here is kind of squishing the seam flat so that the lining goes to the back and the front fabric goes to the front. We just do a top stitch to finish it and make it look nice and professional. Take your time going around the corners. This does make a big difference once the bag is done, because this is the thing that people are going to see the most. So there is no need to rush it. Take your time. Okay, now let's work on the body. Take the body and the two side panels, and you're going to align them right sides together. The bottom of your side panel might overhang the bottom, and that a little bit. Don't worry about that because you can clip it before you stitch the bottom seam together. Bring those right sides together and clip it, and then we will stitch this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance from top to bottom. Now take the second side of your body and you're going to do the same thing. Make sure though that you place it so that the pocket is facing the right direction, because you don't want to install it upside down. So right sides together, clip on both sides, and we're going to do the same thing. 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down. Now that the sides are sewn, what we want to do is just double check that everything is looking good. And we're going to bring the bottom together. You can see how that little overhang here can just be trimmed off. But pay attention to how it's sort of stacked in there. You want to push the side panels in toward the center, and then you're going to clip it. You'll do this all the way across, and make sure you clip both sides. If you don't, it's not a big deal. I just like for my stuff to be clean. So stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way across. And then when you're done, this is what your side panels will look like. And just double check that everything was caught. Little quality check here. And then we're going to turn this right side out. Make sure when you turn this that you're pressing your corners out. Double check your work. Make sure everything looks good, because any adjustments that need to be made would need to be made at this point. Now that that looks good, go ahead and set it aside and let's work on the lining. Grab your slip pocket and bring it right sides together. Make sure as you're stitching it, you leave a small hole on one of the edges to turn it to the right side. I'm sewing at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then before I turn, I want to make sure that the corners are clipped, and this will just reduce bulk in those areas. So turn your pocket out, press your corners, make sure everything is nice and crispy, and then give it a good press. And there should be a natural fold right here in the bottom edge that will be stitched down once we attach it to the body. But bring it over to the machine, and we're going to do a top stitch at a 1/4 inch from that top edge. Now, for placement on the pocket, you should have clip marks transferred from your pattern. If you don't, you can fold it in half to find that center. Do it for both the body and the pocket, and then center the pocket onto the body panel. And depending on what kind of material you're using, you may not have to pin as much as I am, but because I'm using a satin, the fabric shifts a lot. So I pin a lot here because I just know from experience that, even just a tiny bit of shifting will make the pocket look wonky. So go ahead and pin, and then we will stitch at 1/8 of an inch right along the edge of the pocket all the way around to attach it to the body. Make sure you double check your work here to ensure that your pocket is on nicely, and set that aside. Let's work on the side panels for the lining. Same way that we did the body, go ahead and take the side panels and you're going to pin them right sides together all the way down on both sides. Now that that part is done, what we want to do is the same way that we did the front. We want to make sure that the pocket is facing the right direction. And you're just going to bring right sides together, clip it, and we're going to stitch both sides at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that we have the second body panel put together for the lining, the last thing we need to do is close the bottom. We're going to do the same way by pushing the side panels in toward the center, except for the lining, we need to leave a gap about 4 to 5 inches on the bottom to turn the bag at the very end. So go ahead and clip, and just make sure when you bring it over to the machine, you leave that opening so we can turn the bag. Make sure you backstitch where you're leaving that opening. So there's a lot of stress that's put on that seam when you're turning. And if you backstitch there, it'll give it a little bit more support. But this is basically what you should have. Set that aside and let's work on the flap. So grab your body panel and your flap, and you're going to find the center. Either make your notches from the pattern, or you can fold it in half and clip it to find the center. And you're going to bring that right side with the back of the body panel. Align the center markings and clip. We will use 1/8 of an inch seam allowance here just to attach it to that back body panel. To install the second half of our magnetic closure using the center seam, mark down 3.75 inches and make a mark. I'm using that washer to show me where to cut for the prongs, and we're going to do the same thing with the interfacing on this side. We're going to cut the interfacing, put it on over the prongs, and then put the washer on, and this is going to give you some support for that when it's used repeatedly. Check it out, make sure everything aligns. This looks good. So now let's assemble the bag. Grab your lining, and what I'm doing here is folding that flap down because it is a little bit longer than the lining and it can get jumbled up in there. But place your outer bag inside of the lining, and you're going to bring these right sides together. I always start with the side panels and the seams at the side panels because this will tell me if my bag dimensions are off, and I can make adjustments before this part. I always start with the side seams first because that will tell me if the bag and the lining are going to match up. And you do see this from the outside when you turn the bag. So if these are off, it doesn't look very nice. So make sure that you are flattening out those seams as best as possible. My bag is a little more fiddly because I did use a satin on the inside, which has zero give, zero stretch. And the cotton on the outside has a little bit of stretch. So, but we made it work. Now we're going to take this over to the machine and sew it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I always double check my work here just to make sure that all of the edges were caught. And if you have thick material, sometimes things get jumbly even though everything's pinned. But just check your work and make sure that all the edges were caught and it looks good before we turn it. So now what we're going to do is, using that gap that we have in the bottom, we're just going to turn the bag to the right side. Take your time. If you have thick material, this can be a little fumbly. It can be just, it can take some time. So just a little bit at a time, work with one side and then the other, and make sure that you also press your corners out once you do have it turned and everything looks nice. Again, do another look over the bag, make sure that the lining and the body are stitched together, all the seams are good. And now what we're going to do is close up this bottom opening in the lining. I always change my thread on my machine to match so that you can't see it. If you don't want the stitches to be seen, you can turn this in. There's a natural crease here, and then you can hand stitch it if it means that much to you. But I just clip it, and then I will be stitching this very close to that bottom edge at 1/8 of an inch. All right, this is what it should look like. You can see that the thread just sort of disappears. It looks so nice, very close to the edge, closes it. And now what we're going to do is push that all the way in, and we're going to do our final top stitch. And what I'm doing here is rolling the fabric between my fingers to push the lining toward the inside and to kind of crease that top edge to make it really, really flat. And then we will stitch at a 1/4 of an inch all the way around. Disregard the D-rings that you see here as I'm going around the back of the bag with the top stitch. I ended up taking these off because I decided I wanted side placements for the D-rings, and I will show you shortly how we install those for both the back and the sides. Now let's work on our strap. You're going to take your strap, fold it in half, and this is going to give you the center crease. Once you have that, you're going to take each raw edge and fold it in toward that center crease. What I like to do is take one side, fold it in, pin it, clip it, and then bring the other side to the center as well, and then fold it in half again and clip it. So I'm kind of saving myself a little bit of work, but I've done this a million times. So we're bringing that second side in, and I'm folding it at the same time and clipping it. So then once you've done that, you want to make sure also, because the ends are going to be seen, you want to make sure that you are folding the fabric in on the ends as well to make it look really nice. And then we will stitch this right along that open edge at a 1/8 inch seam allowance all the way down. This is what your strap should look like. Looks really nice. Now set that aside and let's work on the D-ring tab. Bring your D-ring tag and fold it over 1/8 of an inch on each end of the long side of the fabric. And then you're going to bring those pieces together and we're going to stitch this at 1/8 of an inch all the way down. Now, depending on how you're going to install your D-ring, the way you fold this is going to be slightly different. If you're sewing it on, you want to have a little bit more surface material here to work with to make sure that you catch it underneath. So for this, we're just hiding the raw edge. So since this is getting sewn on the back as an option, I wanted to fold it this way and then you just clip it on. For this, because I decided I wanted to use the rivet, I am doing the same thing. I want to hide those raw edges, except I'm making this a little bit shorter. And where I'm folding it means that once I attach it to the bag here on the side, then I can use a rivet to secure it in place. So for the side installation, I'm going to come down about 1/2 an inch from the top edge. And what I'm trying to do here is hide the hardware from being visible from the outside. So depending on the width of your hardware, how big you're using, you may come down a little bit more or a little bit less. But the idea here is that you want to bring the D-ring so that when it's fully extended, it's flush with that top edge. Pin this in place, and then you're going to use either an awl or your hand press, whatever you have to create a hole there for your rivet. This awl is actually made for leatherworking, so I love using it on these projects because even though this is really thick, I know that this is light work for this thing. It's a little bit bulky to get my hole punch in there. It'll still work, but the awl is a little bit easier. Now what I'm doing is grabbing one set of my rivets and I'm going to stick that in to hold it while I grab the cap. I recently got this hand press by Cam Snaps, and I absolutely love it because I have a table press, and I didn't realize for a long time that they actually had this, but this is how I set my rivets. It's lightweight, it's very easy to squeeze, and it does such a great job setting these rivets. Look how pretty that looks from the outside and from the inside. So if you did not want the rivet, you could pin this on or clip this on and then stitch it. If you don't want the stitches to be seen from the outside, you can attach the hardware to the lining before you construct the bag. So there's several different ways of putting this together. This is just the way that I'm doing it today. And now, because I'm not using any of the swivel hooks, I just thread my strap into the D-ring, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create a hole for the rivet, and this is going to permanently attach the strap to the bag. For this particular bag, this is exactly what I wanted. Although if you wanted to use a swivel hook, instead of attaching it to the D-ring, you would attach it to the D-ring on the swivel hook, and that would make this strap removable. And again, don't forget to set it using your table press or your hand press to set the rivet. This makes it permanent, and it looks so nice when it's done. And there you have it. So your bag is complete. And let's just take a look and make sure that the quality is there, that everything looks good. But this is a complete bag. I love it because even though I made these permanent, you can actually tuck the straps into the bag and close the flap and carry it as a clutch. They're lightweight. They don't take up a lot of room in there. Look how cute that is. Absolutely love this bag. So cute. If you wanted a crossbody strap, all you have to do is use the longer option on the pattern. And you can also use it as a crossbody. Let's talk about some options for installing D-rings on the bag panel. Regardless of what you go with, your placement will be 2 inches in from the side seam. So go ahead and mark that. And then what I'm showing you here is taking your tab, and you can baste it at the end to hold it together, but instead of folding it in on itself, you can actually stick this right in the seam before you attach the flap. What I'm doing here is trying to figure out visually what this will look like once it's sewn together and the bag is turned to the right side. How much of that tab do I want sticking up? Because it will be seen from the outside. You will see it. But if you have really cute hardware, this would be a really cool option. And if you have really thick material, this is also a really good option because you basically just sandwich it into the seam. You can also do this technique for installing it on the side panel, and it's the same way. So you just have to think about how close to the seam do you want the D-ring to sit, and then pin it and stitch it in. So here it is on the side seam. I'm doing the same thing. Basically, I'm saying how much of this is going to stick out once I turn it. And then that will tell me how much of that end I actually push into the seam. For this option, we fold the tab in on itself to hide the raw edges. And then what I'm doing here is folding that top edge in to see where I would place this, how low from that top edge I would place this, so that once it's turned, it's a little more streamlined. You can't see as much of it. And then you just stitch around all 4 corners. And I also, a lot of times, will use a rivet here for added security. So this is just what it looks like when it's on. And you can kind of get a feel for what it's going to look like if I fold this top edge down. Once the bag is turned, that's how much of the D-ring will be sticking up and will be seen. This is what it looks like after it's been stitched on. It can be a little tricky with all that bulk and getting it really close to the D-ring, but that's how you do it. There you have it. Okay, so if you've made it this far in the video, then you're done with your bag. Let's take a look at the final piece, and I want to go over a few important details that I think are really important for the pattern. So this is mine. I'm going to put it on so you can see. Okay, look how cute it is. So cute. So the strap is made to just be for the shoulder length. There is an option in the pattern to make it a little bit longer so that you could wear it across your body. Obviously, if you have a shorter upper body, this length would be just fine. I would want mine to hit a little bit lower, so I would lengthen this if I knew I was going to be wearing this across the body. This is the cool thing about all of the options for a bag like this, because we can customize it to whatever it is that we're using it for. So I decided for this bag, I was going to only use it as a shoulder bag, and I was not going to use the hooks for the D-rings. Let's take a look at that, and we'll talk a little bit about some options for that as well. Okay, on the inside, what I've done is used rivets to attach my strap to the D-ring on the inside. So this is always, it's permanent. It's not removable. If you don't want it to be permanent, you just use a clasp here, a lobster clasp, and you can hook it and unhook it. But for me, if I decided I wanted to wear this as a clutch, all I have to do is tuck this strap in. Not a big deal. Close it and boom, you got a cute little clutch. Look how cute this thing is. Adorable. Really freaking cute. Okay, let's also talk about the tab attachment. For all options on the bag, you will have a tab cut out for the D-ring for the placement. Now for me, I decided to go with the contrast for the interior just to give it a little pop of color. But if you did not want this to be seen, you would use the same color as your lining. Now, the placement is a 1/2 inch down from the top edge, and that's going to also depend on the type of hardware that you have. Mine is really thick hardware, so I had to go a 1/2 inch down. That way, let's say this was removable, or I did have it tucked in, and I was going to carry it as a clutch, you would not see the hardware from the outside. That's the reason I placed it 1/2 inch below. So you kind of just have to look at the hardware that you're using and make a judgment call on how you want to construct this. But that's what's so beautiful about designing your own stuff or creating your own stuff, is that you can make it however you want. So for me, I used rivets. You could, as another option, if you don't have rivets, you don't have a rivet press, and you just don't like the look of them, you could sew this on. I would say sew it on to the lining before you put the bag together. And you would do that, so it's just a few steps back. You would just make sure that the stitching doesn't show on the outside of the bag. If you want the stitching to show on the outside of the bag, like me, you could put it on after the entire bag is constructed and put together. You just have to be really careful about the look of your stitches and make sure that they look really nice and neat. That's an option too. So I ended up using a rivet because I think it adds a touch of style on the outside. Color, something cute. So that is the final look. Here is the bag. We've got the pocket on the outside back. This is for a phone. This is 7.5 inches. We have a smaller pocket here. And then on the inside, we got a little pocket here, and then it's very spacious in there. Cute little bag. I love it. This is the Libre, the large. That is it for today. Thank you so much for being here. If you would like to get alerts for our next upcoming project kits, visit alwaysshineyourheart.com and click on the Heartmakers Club, add your email, and you will get the alerts before everybody else does for what we're doing for the next kit. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate the support. Please like and subscribe if you had fun making this, and I will see you guys on the next video.